There's two areas for concern, and the important thing is whether they are directly linked or not. First is what's happening in the fuel itself, and the levels of contamination within the plant suggest that some of the metal cans that surround the fuel have probably burst, and that's letting some of the radioactive material out into what's called the concrete containment. That's been measured for some hours, and that of itself is not a huge question. Then we've seen the collapse of the outside building and the explosion that we've been getting pictures of in the last few minutes. Now, most of that space is just the empty space where the cranes that do the refueling of the reactor go. And if the explosion there has been caused by some other effects of the tsunami, some chemical explosion or the like, and the two aren't directly linked, then it's clearly a serious situation, but that of itself does not necessarily mean major contamination. If they are leaked, if the building has collapsed because of something going on inside the core, maybe as the water is boiled at a very high temperature, some of the water breaks up into separate hydrogen and oxygen, and they can then recombine explosively, then we'd be expecting to be measuring quite high levels of contamination very quickly. So we should soon know from the reports on the contamination levels in the plant whether this is a further complicating factor that's going to have to be dealt with, or whether it's a major development in the radioactive consequences of what's happening.
And we await that information, of course. And just before we went back onto this map, we were looking at pictures of the Fukuyama prefecture and the nuclear reactors there. And there was an awful lot of white steam coming out from one of those facilities. Here it is again for our viewers. Don't know if you can see that as we speak. It may not be new to some of our viewers, but for those who've just joined us, it will be. What does that suggest to you?
Well, we've seen the explosion that took out the upper structure. So now we just have a metal frame where it looked like the other three, which are still intact on the site. And whenever there's an explosion of that sort, there is a cloud of very small particle smoke, which happens for some time. We remember the terrible pictures of 9/11 in New York, for example, where after the buildings collapsed, there was a very large dust cloud. So that of itself it need not be more than just what you would expect whenever any structure of that size collapses in that kind of way. The question that we don't know about is not so much what's happened above the ground. In most reactors, the working parts are put under the ground. It's what is happening just below the surface, which is of the most concern. We'll know that from the contamination. My suspicion is that they'll also try and get a look from above the reactor down into it. This is